Well, good morning, Westfield staff. Welcome to another quarantine conversation. Today we have another special guest with us, our very own Ben Carnes. Many of you know him as a middle school teacher and football coach, but as I've gotten to know Ben and what he does in terms of his mental training program, just been so impressed with his level of knowledge, and I think tools that definitely can apply to us as educators as we think about self-care, self-awareness, and how to bring these tools to life. So, Ben, would you mind telling us a little bit more about yourself and then just a little bit about the mental training program that you have and what you guys do?
Sure. I've been a teacher at Westfield for 13 years. I've always, as a coach, always kind of addressed the mental side of things to give athletes an edge. And then within the last couple of years, started mental training plan, just working with teams inside the school, outside the school, individuals over at ProX. And so just really our goal is to use cognitive brain research and neuropsychology to help athletes overcome obstacles in the mental side of their game. And so, a lot of focus on mental toughness and things like that.
Yeah, so I'm wondering about, as you think about all of these tools and tips that you're giving athletes, when we think about being in the classroom and being aware of our own surroundings, our own emotions, what's going on inside our heads, in our hearts, in our minds, what tools or what kind of actionable tools could you provide for us during this time for as we look at self-care for teachers? We just know that we've got a lot. We're trying to manage, learning at home, e-learning, our own kids, our own families. What might you be able to provide for us just to help us think about and maybe some actionable tools we could use to help take care of ourselves?
Sure. Just over a decade ago, the functional MRI scan changed everything. All of a sudden it wasn't, here's what I think is going on with your mind and body in high pressure situations. It's here's what's happening, and then here's how you can take back control. And that's sort of what we want to talk about today. The images there on the screen, the functional MRI scans, we can see what parts of the brain are active when you're picking up a pencil, when you're listening to someone, when you're doing all these different types of things. And really, we want to teach our players how to use it. We want to modify it to different levels, and then kind of customize it to an individual. And the reason I think that this is applicable to where we're at right now as educators is because this is kind of a high pressure, high stress situation for a lot of folks. It's not just an extended vacation by any means. There's all kinds of stuff,
I
right?
agree with that.
I think at the beginning there were some people that were excited, like, yeah, e-learning, we're going to be at home, and then reality sunk in a little bit of this is a little bit tougher.
Yeah.
One of the things we always start off with is we're in the age of information right now, and there was a TED talk where a lady was saying the wealth of human knowledge is at our fingertips. So what our athletes and what our educators don't need is just, hey, go read this, hey, go read that. It's all there. We don't need that. We need the actionable tools like you talked about. And this first video series that we're going to do today is just going to be all about you taking care of you. And then the second one that we'll get to later on, that's going to be helping others, whether that's, friends, spouses, children, students, whatever. So the first thing that we always start with is just awareness. And there's a part of your brain that's responsible for what am I going to pay attention to? What do I think is important? What's not important? Just like right now, you're not paying attention to what the bottom of your feet feel like because that part of your brain doesn't think it's important. But if I tell you to wiggle your toes, all of a sudden your brain pays attention to that. Same thing, you don't really pay attention to what the back of your neck feels like with your shirt. But that first tool, just kind of bringing awareness, we want people to be aware of what's going on in their mind and in their body so that they can take back control and they can do something about it. Daniel Kahneman wrote a fantastic book, Thinking Fast and Slow. And he's a brilliant guy he knows all about the brain and all the different parts, but he simplified it down to just, we have system 1 and we have system 2. And system 1 is going to do things automatically. So like you see 2 plus 2, you don't have to think about it. Your brain just goes, oh, that's 4. Or you see the letters D-O-G. You don't have to sound that out like my kindergartner was earlier this year. Dog, right? We know what that is. And those are simple examples, but then we get into a little bit more complex examples on a golf course. You're getting ready to sink a putt, or you're getting ready to take that very first tee shot. All of a sudden that automatic part of your brain is like, we're in danger. This is a threat. This is stressful. And so then he talks about system 2, and what parts of your brain are included with that, and sort of how do you take back that intentional control.
So what does this look like? Like, how do we begin to bring awareness to system 1 and 2, and then how do we control some of that focus?
Sure. So the very next one is just dealing with focus. What automatically, what are we going to focus on? And then how do we take back control? What's that look like? So we talk about, with our guys, what's the science behind it, right? Because when I first started coaching, it wasn't that long ago, but you could just say, hey, I want you to go do this. And now it's a little bit more of, well, why do I want to do that? You know what I mean? And so when people understand the why behind it, it usually has a little bit more power, a little bit more teeth to it. So we start with like dirt bike riders. You put sensors on their arms. When they look over at a wall, it actually moves the muscles just a little bit. So they want to focus on where they're going, not where they're trying to avoid. Anybody that's ever been on a golf course and there's water on the left and you're at the tee box thinking, don't go left, don't go left, don't go left. Swing, splash, right? Or the basketball player that's trying to shoot a free throw, the same thing they've done thousands and thousands of times. But now all of a sudden, when they're focused on the crowd or the pressure of the situation or things like that, those neurons can't fire in the same pattern in their brain, and it gets disrupted. Instead of that nice smooth shot, it kind of gets jerky or forced or whatever. And so that's athletes. For the educators, for all of us right now, we've also got our prefrontal cortex helps us kind of think about and plan for the future. And when information is lacking, it sort of starts to run through some what if scenarios, and it tries to guess what's the most likely to happen and run simulations kind of based on previous events that are most similar. So for an educator, this might be, I'm too focused on the news. I'm too focused on all the bad stuff that's on TV or social media. It could be, I'm trying to figure out what the future is going to look like. I have no idea what the future is going to look like, and that stresses me out, and I don't like it because I'm not in control. That could be, I'm focused on this student that I'm trying to reach, I'm trying to connect with, but it's just not working over the social distancing. And so we want to be aware of what's our brain automatically focusing on so that we can kind of take back control.
Yeah, I find it really interesting that our brain doesn't really care about being right. It just cares about being efficient.
Yep.
And so those automatic responses sometimes that can cause stress begins to activate those parts in our brain that will disconnect that prefrontal cortex, right? Like if I'm watching the news or if I'm overwhelmed with all the e-learning and the grading, and then my kids come in and I'm trying to get stuff done, and this stress response has a real biological aspect to it as well,
sure,
which disconnects that prefrontal cortex, which then inhibits us from thinking things like, oh, I'll get through this. It'll be okay. Let's take a deep breath. So it sounds like what you're talking about is trying to bring intentional focus to that awareness, to trying to calm that part of your brain that just takes over automatically and engage that prefrontal cortex. Is that kind of what I'm hearing you say?
Absolutely. And so how do we get system 2 to take over control? So that the first thing that athletes have to do is figure out, what is it that I'm thinking about on that first tee box? What is it I'm thinking about after I throw an interception or miss a basket or whatever? And so, writing that down is incredibly helpful. But But then that next step is, how do I take back control? And so we do this next activity where we say, all right, here's this circle. Everything that is inside of your control, write it down inside of that circle. And it seems and it sounds elementary to us, but just the act of writing things down engages different parts of the brain. That's a whole nother topic for a later time. But we think about, what are the things also that matter right now? So there are all kinds of things, curriculum wise, that we want to be able to teach our students, right? And there's all kinds of things that we want to be able to do for our students, but some of those we can't do right now. Some of those are either out of our control, and the distance learning or the e-learning just prevents it, or it's just right now is not the time to get some curriculum things ironed out, or whatever that may be. But whatever, where those two meet, the things that are in my control that I can control, and the things that matter right now, that's what we want our athletes focusing on. And we know just from brain research that you can't say, hey, I know that you just missed that basket, just don't think about it. That's not a thing. You can't do that. But we can say, your brain can only consciously focus on one thing at a time. And so if we can take back control of, here's what I'm going to focus on, then you're back in control.
That sounds so easy, yet we all know how difficult that is, right? But I think, and I'm with you, that sounds like such an elementary, excuse me, kind of exercise. But what I find interesting is when you really do sit down and try to almost remove yourself and give yourself that 30,000-foot view and ask yourself those questions: what's in my control right now? What matters the most? And those things that are in your control and that matter, if we can put our focus there, it does begin to narrow it. I don't know if anyone out there is like me, but I can tend to think about the whole big picture and all the things that are not right, or the things that I wish were a different way, but I can get lost in that cyclical thinking. And unless I interrupt that cycle, I can go down the road of some negativity. So
Sure.
I think it's a really cool tool, and one I would encourage all of us to just get a paper and try it out and see what happens.
Next one is self-talk. So we've all got voice that's just rolling in the back of our mind all the time, right? And we know that the average person has about 48.6 thoughts per minute. Some a little higher, some a little bit lower. But the thing we talk about with coaches and athletes is like a batter that's walking up to an at bat with bases loaded, games on the line, 2 outs, whatever high pressure situation you got. It's not, well, this seems to be a high pressure situation. It's like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I'm good enough. I don't know if I have what it takes. I struck out against this guy last time, right? Those thoughts are just rolling. And so again, starting off with, what is that little voice in the back of your mind saying during those times where you feel stressed out, those times where you feel like you're kind of off target? And again, we can't just say, well, don't pay attention to it. That's not a thing. And we can't say just turn it off. That's also not a thing. But again, we can replace it with something else intentional. And so you can use a Bible verse or some kind of a mantra or some kind of a statement. A mantra being something like, I can, I will. A go-to statement is something that's incredibly powerful that I do with all my athletes. And there's 2 parts. And so the first part is, I always have this. So I worked with a guy, Nick Ferrer, one of the best quarterbacks come through Westfield, and he worked his tail off. And so his first part was, I put in the time, I put in the work, I'm the best quarterback in the country. And so if he would have just said to himself, I'm the best quarterback in the country, the part of your brain that wants to fix things is going to say, no, you're not. But when you pair it up with, I put in the time, I put in the work, I'm the best quarterback in the country, that same part of your brain can't toss out the first part. And so we can almost kind of trick our brain into accepting that. And so the activities that I've seen usually suggest saying this like 25 times a day, which sounds like a lot, but if you say it 10 times in the morning while you're walking downstairs, or brushing your teeth. And it ends up not really being that much, but I think you'd be amazed at how much power this has. I know Carmen at one point during a particularly stressful time with our kiddos would say things like, I love my family. We will get through this. And that was just what she said over and over in her mind. And it works. And it not only does it drown out that little voice, because now instead of listening, you're talking, but it also changes your focus, and it gets you focused back on things that you can control and that are important.
Yeah. I'm wondering too, Ben, if you think sometimes I think it's okay to even recognize the stuff that you're in, and being able to allow it. So that first part maybe being, you know what, this sucks right now, being at home, but I can get through this, right? Like we'll get through this together. So maybe recognizing, I think at first, and allowing yourself to feel that way is a good first step as well. And then kind of again counteracting that a little bit with something that's a little bit more productive, a little bit
Yep.
more positive.
Sure.
Is another way to do it as well. I also love the word and I've been wrestling with this a little bit, but I'd love to see what you think about it. That I can feel frustrated and joyful. I can feel angry, yet also and feel secure. I think we try to think so binary that it's good or bad, it's black or white, it's this or that. And so really trying to help ourselves be like, you know what, we are where we are right now. Back to what you were talking about, like this is what I can control. It's okay. I will get through it. And having this mantra, I think, is such a great idea and tool that we can use. So what is it? What's your go-to? And I'm asking you now, right now, Westfield staff, like, what's your mantra? What's your go-to? It's okay to acknowledge that, you know what, there are times that are hard and times do suck. But what's your mantra? How do you get yourself out of that? So another really great tool, Ben. What else have you been thinking about in terms of this process that you have? We've talked a little bit about being aware, controlling your focus, controlling your self-talk. What else?
So the next one is your body. There are going to be, during stressful times, high pressure situations, there are going to be things that happen physically. Everything from your hands get shaky or sweaty to heart rate, or you just feel this rage of anger that you feel like your blood is boiling in your head. And again, it's just that first step is let's be aware of what's going on physically so that then we can take some steps to take back control. And one of the things I always talk about with coaches is, look, if you just go up to a college basketball team and say, hey guys, the next time you're feeling stressed, I want you to take 2 deep breaths. They're going to look at you like, why don't you give me something that works? That's stupid, right? Now, my 3.5-year-old, he'll take that and he does it and it works. But you know, with the older guys, the older gals, when you instead say, you know, look, your brainstem's connected to your vagus nerve. That vagus nerve goes all the way back down through your spine, connects to every major organ in your body. And I can't teach you how to take back control of your heart rate necessarily, or how much fats and sugars your liver's releasing, or what your adrenal gland is doing, or anything like that. But if you take back intentional control of your lungs, which you can see right there in the middle of that nerve, it basically interrupts the signal that's going from your brainstem that's saying things are not okay. We need to start the fight or flight. And that what we know from science is that your body gets comfortable with something. So you have a go-to fight or flight, and it's just, there's different degrees of, this is like a 10, we need to freak out, or this is like an 8 or a 5. But once you learn how to control that response, that's a really good thing, because now, you know, for athletes, for example, can use it on the football field, on the basketball field, before they give a speech. One of my former athletes, before he proposed to his now fiance, said he was behind the Christmas tree doing his combat breathing. So, you know, it's something, this is the first step. This is the easy step. but it's incredibly powerful just because of the biological stuff that it's tied to. After that, obviously there's some forced muscular relaxation you can do, like people that have tight shoulders or tight hands, because your body just naturally tightens those muscles up as a stress response. You can tighten those up and then relax and exhale. And basically what you're doing is taking intentional control of those muscles, tightening them up, and then loosening them. There's different mindfulness apps that can help you out. And there was one that I was doing on the Calm app where it said, completely relax. And I was like, all right, I'm relaxed. It said, relax your face. Okay, it's relaxed. And it said, it went down to like, relax your lips, relax your tongue. And it was like, I didn't realize some of the tension that was present. And then once I was aware of it, I was able to relax a little bit more. And so, something like that, if what you're dealing with isn't necessarily, I can't stop thinking about something, it's not a focus problem. And it's not, oh, I've got this little voice in the back of my mind. It's not a self-talk problem. If yours is, there are physical changes that I need to deal with, there's ways for you to take back control.
Yeah. And it sounds like it all kind of starts again right back up at the top about being aware, right? Kind of being aware and bringing intentional focus to those parts of the body. I think sometimes it's okay to kind of name what's going on, and being able to accept that. Like when you feel your heart rate start going, or your muscles tense up, or you feel yourself getting a little bit nervous, is to just intentionally name that and say, oh, there it is. Yep, that's stress. It's not good. It's not bad. It just is. It's stress. And so now I need to take back control. And I think breathing is one way to obviously to do that, to bring oxygen back to the brain, again, to calm that part of your brain, the amygdala, that is saying you're in danger. That again reconnects that Wi-Fi connection to the prefrontal cortex, which actually helps you think.
Right.
Because what's happening is when that it has taken over, your part of the brain that plans and thinks to the future isn't working real well. And it sounds like what you're encouraging us to do is to take control of that back intentionally.
Yep. Which kind of leads us into our last one for today, is taking back control of your emotions. And so all this stuff just kind of goes in a cycle, right? So I'll give you an example. 2013, Westfield went to state championship for the first time in a long time, and we had a great team that didn't really deal with any mental issues the whole way through the season. And all of a sudden, we walk into Lucas Oil, and we were focused on how big the place was, and we were focused on how good a player from the other team was, which he was. We were focused on all the wrong stuff. We were having, guys were saying in their mind, I don't know if we can do this. I don't know if I'm good enough. One of our linebackers actually in the first quarter made the comment to Coach Gilbert, I don't know if we're going to be able to tackle Terry. He was like, what do you mean? Yeah, of course we're going to be able to tackle him. And just, we had guys that were just physically, visibly shaking. And so this was just spinning around in their mind over and over and over and over, and they're feeling unconfident, they're feeling anxious, they're doubting themselves. So whatever those emotions are, sometimes that's what you notice first. You notice, I'm anxious. That kind of middle part of your brain, that amygdala, I notice I'm not confident anymore. I don't like how I'm feeling. And so one of the things we talk about with our athletes is, so do something about it. So let's go back the other way. If in, the quarterback position, for example, if you want to feel confident, what do you need to do with your body? As a basketball player, if you want to feel confident, how are you going to talk to yourself? As a soccer player, if you want to be dialed in on the right stuff, what do you need to focus on? And again, writing it down is incredibly helpful. So, maybe you're sitting at home and you're stressed out about the future or whatever it is. Okay, well, how are you going to take back control of your body? What are you going to say to yourself? and what are you going to focus on? What's in your control and what matters right now? And so instead of just waiting around to see how we're going to feel and letting circumstances determine how we feel, we can take back control. So that lower part of your brain, that brainstem, can send signals up to that middle part, your amygdala, and make it feel certain ways. But if we slow down, we take back control, we can go the other way from that prefrontal cortex and say, hey, let's think through this, come up with a plan. It's not as bad as we think.
Yeah, you said something that really stuck out to me. Said something to the effect of do something about it. I think that's the important piece, is that sometimes we feel stressed or we feel overwhelmed, and we'll just sit there in that, which is okay to an extent. But again, if we want to feel differently, if we want to think differently, we actually have to go do something. And so I see your next slide says action. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Sure. This is difficult to do, especially when you're first starting out, if you're not writing it down. It just is. There's too much to think about. Your brain can start going and thinking about 500 other things. This kind of narrows you in. So pick one of those tools and just go back and do it and write it down. Another really powerful tool is a gratitude journal. And I'll be honest, the first time I heard about one of those, I was like, why would I write down 3 things I'm grateful for every day? Like, that's ridiculous. That's not going to help with anything. But it does. And so the grateful portion of your brain and the portion of your brain that deals with stress, they can't be active at the same time. Those functional MRI scans, you can actually see one goes on and the other goes off. And also your RAS, or your reticular activating system. It's that same part of your brain that when you buy a brand new red pickup truck, all of a sudden you notice every single red pickup truck that ever drives by you. And you're like, oh my goodness, they're everywhere. And it's because that RAS has now been told, hey, this is important, let's pay attention to it. And the same thing is true with the gratitude. If you're writing down, I'm grateful for these 3 things or these 5 things, all of a sudden that part of your brain starts paying attention to, hey, here's something throughout the day that we could be grateful for. And hey, there's something else. On the other hand, if you're focused on the negative stuff, you're kind of training that RAS to look out for other negative stuff. And so that, just having somewhere that you're writing stuff down is incredibly powerful. Even if you don't want to do it for the rest of your life, just to get through the stressful time and sort of take back control and take action, it's incredibly helpful.
Yeah, I often hear these referred to as practices, right? Like something that you have to do over and over and over again. I'm with you. A gratitude journal, it won't really do much if you do it for one day and, well, that didn't work. I don't feel any different. But I think when we think about just the concept of neuroplasticity, that our brains are constantly being shaped and changed from our relationships and our experiences and the way that we interact with the world, these intentional practices can actually begin to rewire connections in your brain to provide more joy, more gratitude, but it does not happen overnight. Am I right on that?
Oh, for sure. It's just like people that are born deaf, and those parts of your brains that usually process audio get kind of taken over and rewired to process visual a little bit better.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Our brains are always changing in response to our relationships and our experience. And so we have to be intentional about feeding it what we want it to, again, going back to what do we have control over? What matters to us the most? What's going on in our mind? What are those voices in our head? Not the crazy voices, right? But those voices in our head that some of us have a critical voice. Some of us have a committee of voices in our heads, kind of trying to tell us one way or the other.
Yep.
Which are just thoughts, and they come and they go. So what should people do if they want to learn more about this? I feel like you and I just kind of scratched the surface on some of these, but provided some actionable tools. Where can people go that if they want to dive a little deeper into some of these tools or hear a little more, where would they go?
Sure. So Isaac McGay and I have a podcast, Coaching Minds Podcast. You can find it at our website, mentaltrainingplan.com. Click on the podcast button, or you can just search for it on Apple or Spotify. wherever you listen to your podcast. Season 1, episode 2, we go into a little bit more detail about the focus cycle and actually where you could download one of those sheets. So if you don't want to do the whole journal thing and you just want to fill out the sheets that we do with teams, that we do with individual athletes, that's available. Season 2, episode 4 is all about developing toughness and the impact that your actions have on teammates. And then season 2, episode 6 was just a bonus episode that we released, kind of just helping athletes deal with and process this whole quarantine whatever you want to call this current situation of our new normal here for a little while. Again, there's our website. So we're also available on social media at Mental TR Plan, and we use the hashtag plan and execute, because that mental training plan, the whole purpose is, let's take what we know about how your brain and body works, let's come up with a plan, and then let's execute it, let's put it to work.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much, Ben, for being with us today. We're going to do one more of these coming up and dive a little bit into some goal setting. So we look forward to that. But I do appreciate your time this morning, and we look forward to reconnecting soon.
Thanks, Kyle.